Let me tell you, you're right, and thanks for mentioning my experience both at Maine Justice and in U.S. Attorney's offices. And the way it works, the way it always has worked, is there's a really thin cadre of, 2 or 3 or 6 or whatever, real go-to people in the individual offices and at Maine Justice. The real sort of
I need to tell you about something absolutely devastating that's happening at the Department of Justice, and the numbers are so shocking that they should make everyone stop and realize just how much damage Trump is doing to our justice system. 2,900 attorneys have either quit or been fired from the Department of Justice in just the first 10 months of this year. That's not a typo, not 290, not even 900.
Repository of institutional information who knows what's going on. And they have been disproportionately forced out. So, typically the 1/3 that it would be people who have done their 5 or 6 years and go into private practice, say. But some people stay and become the real and wannabe institutional knowledge of the place and are huge and are hugely relied on. So problem one that means this is all understated is those people are disproportionately left among the people who have departed the DOJ. Problem two is a lot of similar people have just been warehoused purposely by this administration to really useless kind of outposts. For instance, maybe they are dealing with the new initiative in the Civil Rights Division about
2,900 lawyers have left one of the most prestigious legal institutions in the country in less than a year. And when you add in the massive number of FBI agents who've also quit or been fired, you're looking at triple or quadruple the normal attrition rate for any typical year, let alone a single term. Reuters did an analysis of these departures and found they're having a devastating impact on actual cases. A federal magistrate judge in Washington, D.C. looked at felony cases brought by the DOJ over the past couple months and found that about 20% of cases are now resulting in dismissals. Let me give you context for why that's insane. Historically, less than 0.5% of cases filed by federal prosecutors get dismissed.
Universities pursuing diversity, whatever, they are out of the action and purposely out of the action. The third point, the people who remain, you have, whispers that come out again and again. They're not doing anything, either because they're not being given anything to do because no one trusts them, or some of the cases are so completely antithetical to why they came to the department that they're just sort of pushing paper. And then fourth, the numbers that have been lost come disproportionately from places that were previously so vital and the crown jewels of the department and its work. Civil Rights Division is a big one. You mentioned public integrity. It went from 30 or so at the point where that now Judge Emile Beauvais shut the door on them and said somebody here is going to sign the dismissal in the Mayor Adams case.
Federal prosecutors have incredibly high conviction rates because they only bring cases they're confident they can win. The fact that the dismissal rate has jumped from 0.5% to 20% tells you everything about how broken the system has become. Magistrate judges and federal judges across the country are going through case histories and finding this pattern over and over. A case gets filed, then dismissed without prejudice, then refiled, then dismissed without prejudice again, then refiled and dismissed with prejudice because the DOJ can't actually prosecute effectively anymore. The moment they meet any resistance, they fold. They don't have the staffing. They don't have the institutional knowledge. They don't have competent leadership. And in many cases, they're bringing garbage prosecutions that were politically motivated to begin with. Think about the high-profile examples we've seen. The DOJ tried to indict Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, and couldn't secure an indictment after trying 3 times in different jurisdictions, twice in Norfolk and once in Alexandria. They've gone after James Comey, but we haven't heard anything about that case in months, presumably because it's fallen apart. These aren't just embarrassing failures for a few political prosecutions. This is happening across the board in D.C., Virginia, California, everywhere. There was a case recently in Los Angeles where a protester was charged with very serious crimes. The incident was on tape. Should have been an easy prosecution. But the jury looked at the DOJ prosecutors and essentially said, "We don't trust you. Not guilty." And this is becoming a pattern. Juries across the country are starting to view the Justice Department as an illegitimate, politicized entity that can't be trusted to tell the truth or pursue justice fairly. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. Think about what that means for criminal defense attorneys. If you're defending someone in federal court right now, you barely have to work to undermine the prosecution's credibility. You can ask questions during jury selection that plant seeds of doubt about whether the DOJ has political motivations. You can reference in your closing argument that this is a weaponized department going after your client because Trump has made it clear he hates everyone unless they bribe him or give him some quid pro quo. Jurors understand that. They're watching the Epstein files cover-up. They're seeing the firings and resignations. They're reading about cases being dismissed left and right, and they're bringing that skepticism into the jury box. Even in cases where the evidence is strong, where it should be a clear conviction, the DOJ is losing because juries don't trust them anymore. That's catastrophic for law enforcement. When federal prosecutors can't get convictions even with good evidence, the entire system breaks down. Criminals go free. Victims don't get justice. And the rule of law becomes a joke. But it's not just about the cases they're losing. It's about the cases they're not bringing at all. The Trump regime has turned all of the Justice Department's resources toward immigration enforcement, pulling people off roofs who've been working as roofers for decades, going after farmers who've been in this country contributing to our economy. Meanwhile, they're not pursuing drug trafficking cases, sex trafficking cases, child trafficking cases, espionage, public integrity prosecutions, financial fraud. The Justice Department doesn't even know what public integrity means anymore. And when they do bring cases, Trump often interferes. They brought an antitrust criminal case against a concert ticketing company executive, built up the file, charged the guy. Then Trump found out the defendant is friends with Jared Kushner and immediately pardoned him. That's not justice. That's corruption. And it's happening over and over again with Trump pardoning people based on personal connections rather than any legitimate review of their cases. Harry Litman, a former U.S. attorney in Pennsylvania and former top Justice Department official, broke down why these numbers are actually worse than they appear on the surface. Yes, 2,900 departures is astronomical, but that really understates the overall impact because of how the Justice Department functions. In every office, there's a thin cadre of 2 or 3 or 6 real go-to people, the institutional knowledge holders who know what's going on, who have the experience and expertise that everyone else relies on. Those people have been disproportionately forced out or pushed aside. Typically, when prosecutors leave the Justice Department, it's young attorneys who've done their 5 or 6 years and are moving into private practice. But some people stay and become the institutional backbone of the office. They're the ones with 20 or 30 years of experience who can handle the most complex cases, who train the younger prosecutors, who maintain continuity and competence. Those are exactly the people who've been targeted in this purge, either fired outright or made so miserable that they quit. The second problem Harry identified is that many of the experienced prosecutors who remain have been warehoused into essentially useless positions. Maybe they're working on the Civil Rights Division's new initiative about universities and diversity programs, something completely outside their expertise that keeps them occupied but ineffective. They're purposely being kept out of the action because Trump's political appointees don't trust them or don't want competent career prosecutors asking questions about the legitimacy of politically motivated cases. The third issue is that the people who remain in active positions often aren't doing anything meaningful. They're not being given cases because they're not trusted, or the cases they're assigned are so antithetical to why they became prosecutors in the first place that they're just pushing paper and going through the motions. You have career prosecutors who join the Justice Department to pursue justice sitting at their desks with nothing to do or with assignments that violate everything they believe about their professional responsibility. And fourth, the departures have come disproportionately from what used to be the crown jewels of the department. The Civil Rights Division has been absolutely gutted. Public Integrity, which investigates corruption by government officials, went from about 30 prosecutors to 2. 2 prosecutors handling public integrity cases for the entire country, and those 2 aren't even being allowed to do their work effectively. Judge Emmett Sullivan shut the door on them in the Mayor Adams case and essentially said, "Someone here is going to sign the dismissal, or everyone's losing their job," showing how even federal judges don't trust what the Justice Department is doing anymore. So the numbers themselves, which are astonishing, don't begin to tell the story of the actual loss of competence, efficiency, and institutional knowledge. And what remains behind from this skeletal crew is a bunch of garbage cases. Besides being politically driven, they're just bad prosecutions that shouldn't have been brought. The Letitia James case isn't just politically motivated, it's ridiculous on the merits, barely involving any actual laws that were violated. The case about someone throwing something at an ICE agent turned into an acquittal because jurors didn't trust the DOJ's version of events. This is happening more and more around the country, and Harry made a point that really captures the tragedy of this. It used to be an honor to stand up in court and say, "Harry Littman for the United States," or "anyone for the United States." That meant something. Judges listened. Juries gave you the benefit of the doubt. There was respect and trust built into that simple phrase because the Justice Department had earned it over decades of generally professional, nonpartisan work. Now, after just 10 months of Trump's second term, you have court after court saying we don't trust you anymore. Judge Zinnes completely excoriated the department yesterday in the Abrego-Garcia immigration case. Juries are returning no true bills at record paces, meaning grand juries aren't even willing to indict based on what federal prosecutors are presenting to them. You never used to see that. Grand juries famously will indict a ham sandwich because prosecutors control the process and only present evidence supporting their case. But now grand juries are looking at what the DOJ brings them and saying, "No, we're not buying this." All of this multiplies that big number of departures into something much worse, a much less efficient, much less knowledgeable, much less trustworthy institution that's not serving the public anymore. And when the day finally comes to try to repair this damage, assuming Trump is eventually out of office and someone who cares about the rule of law takes over, it's going to be like dealing with a post-apocalyptic landscape. You can't just rehire 2,900 prosecutors and have everything go back to normal. The institutional knowledge is gone, the trust is destroyed, the reputation is shattered. Think about what it takes to build a respected law firm. It's incredibly difficult. You need years of good work, ethical conduct, successful outcomes, and trust built with clients and courts and the legal community. The Justice Department was like the biggest law firm in the world with one of the strongest reputations you could have. Before all of this, it was a highlight of people's careers to work there. It was viewed throughout the legal community as having impenetrable integrity. United States of America versus, followed by someone's name, meant something in court. It carried weight and credibility that took generations to build. Now, federal judges look at DOJ prosecutors the way you'd look at a lawyer who's facing ethics complaints with the state bar. They're skeptical. They're wondering what you're trying to sell them. They're not giving you the benefit of the doubt anymore. And juries reflect that same skepticism because they're reading the news. They're seeing the political interference. They're watching the Epstein cover-up, and they're bringing all of that distrust into the courtroom with them. The people who are still working at the Justice Department are in shell shock. Harry said, when you talk to anyone who used to work there, who remembers what made it great, they're devastated by what's happened. In such short order, Trump took a meat grinder to the entire institution. Everything that made it function effectively, everything that made it respected, everything that made it an essential part of our justice system has been systematically destroyed. And the survivors, the career prosecutors who remain, can't do good work anymore. The place is a disaster. This matters for everyone, not just lawyers and prosecutors and people directly involved in the justice system. When the Justice Department loses credibility, when it can't get convictions even in clear cases, when experienced prosecutors flee rather than participate in politicized garbage prosecutions, we all lose. Actual criminals go free because juries don't trust federal prosecutors anymore. Victims of real crimes don't get justice. White-collar fraud, corruption, civil rights violations, organized crime, All of these things depend on having a functional Justice Department with prosecutors who can be trusted to pursue evidence wherever it leads without political interference. And we're losing that. We've lost most of it already in just 10 months. 2,900 attorneys gone, conviction rates plummeting, dismissal rates skyrocketing, trust evaporating, competence disappearing, and Trump doesn't care because he never wanted an independent Justice Department pursuing justice. He wanted a personal legal team that would prosecute his enemies and protect his friends. That's what he's built, and in the process, he's destroyed an institution that took generations to build and will take generations to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. This is what authoritarianism looks like when it takes root. Not dramatic coups or military takeovers, but the slow, grinding destruction of institutions that are supposed to check executive power. The Justice Department was one of those institutions. It was supposed to enforce the law equally against everyone, including the president. Now it's Trump's personal weapon, wielded against anyone he doesn't like while protecting anyone who pays him tribute. And 2,900 lawyers decided they couldn't be part of that anymore. That should tell you everything about how bad things have gotten and how much worse they're likely to get if this continues.